Do we need Alex here? Or no?
What?
Do we need Alex here?
Alex?
Rademacher?
He's got class right now.
Oh, does he? Okay, all right. Okay, good morning, everybody. We are the Contratech Group. My name is Joseph Billstrom.
I'm Matthew Olson.
I'm Brandon Meyer.
And I'm Micah Schmidt. For our agenda today, I will be going over the project overview with you. Matthew will be going over the Primavera P6 files. Joe will be going over the technology and the demonstration of our project, and Brandon will be going over the challenges and the postmortem, and we'll end with some questions. So for our project overview, we are working with Contratech. Contratech is a startup group out of Australia that deals with project planning for the construction and the construction and transportation industries. So what their problem was is that the actual files, the project planning files, are very elaborate and very expensive. So what they would like us to do is, or their solution was that they would like a web app to simplify viewing these files, because they are much too expensive and they didn't actually need all the bells and whistles within the software itself. And so they created the Project Planner application. The Project Planner application was actually created by a previous Capstone group. They added the functionality of adding Microsoft project files and being able to view these files as Gantt charts on their application. What we have been asked to do is actually go and add the functionality of importing the Primavera P6 files, as well as adding visualization for the milestones. So some of the actual adaptations we've had to make to the original request is that we learned through our research that the files for the Microsoft project file and the Primavera P6 are both proprietary files. That means that we're not legally allowed to actually go and attempt to export them. So we were initially asked to edit and be able to export back to the original file format for both the Microsoft project files and the Primavera files. But we found that because we can no longer do the export, that the editing as well was obsolete. So this here is a screenshot of the actual Project Planner application. As you can see here, this is actually the file for a Primavera file. You can see that by the .xer file form extension. And then here you can also see that we have the milestones shown as black diamonds, the start and the finish milestone. So moving on to our schedule, for Sprint 1 we had to do a lot of documentation and research. The documentation showed that there's opportunity to enhance it, and so we decided to go and actually overhaul a lot of the diagrams to better portray what they're trying to show with the diagram and how the application actually works. For Sprint 2, also for Sprint 1 we had overhaul for the setup documentation. This is so that anyone that has to actually work with the project planner in the future can easily set up their own local environment so they can test and debug the application much easier. Sprint 2, we were able to actually go out and parse the entire Primavera file out. Sprint 3, we were able to go and actually import the entire Primavera file into our application. And for Sprint 4, we worked on the visualization for those milestones, shown as the black diamonds in the previous slide, as well as working on previously existing bugs. For our team management, we decided to use Trello for our task logging because it's a very easy to use UI, and it was very easy for us to see what needed to be done and what needed to get done by certain times. We used GitLab as our code repository because that was provided for us by Contratech. We used Discord as our informal communication base for everyone because everyone was very versed in Discord. And finally, we have Skype for Business was our formal weekly meetings with our sponsor because it is a platform built for professionalism. Now I'm going to actually hand it off to Matthew now, who's going to talk a bit more about the Primavera P6 files.
All right, yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the file that we were working with and how we kind of use that to get the information out of it and put it into the Planner application in a similar vein as the Microsoft file. So first, Primavera, just in and of itself, is another project planning application. It's not much different from the Microsoft project planner, and a lot of the information that we got was pretty similar in that way. So it made it really easy to adapt that stuff together and really make it a really smooth transition between the two different files. So half of the Primavera is in a spreadsheet format, which really gives a lot of clean information on start dates, end dates, all that kind of stuff. The other half of it is formatted in a Gantt chart, and that's what a lot of the sponsors' employees have been used to. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a visualization that kind of mirrored that a little bit so they would be familiar with it. So the Primavera also deals a lot with the scheduling, the editing of different project plans depending on how much time has been spent or if something's ahead or behind schedule. So there's a lot of changing in the Primavera too. That is something that the sponsor really wants to get into this planner application for the future. And Primavera likes to have two similar but different types of tasks. The first being a general task that takes a certain amount of time, has a start date and end date, and a milestone, which generally marks the beginning or the end of a group of tasks or some major task in the project. And finally, the completions and delays, which are very important when you're modifying a schedule for a plan or something like that. So this is a little bit of what the project planner in Primavera looks like. You can see this is the spreadsheet format, and it is very simple. You can see the grouping in it and the start and end dates, the description, all that kind of stuff is there. It's really simple to read and use, and that makes it really nice for our sponsor's business. And here you can see the visualization, so you can see a little bit how we tried to mirror that visualization with the diamonds for milestones, as that's something that is already implemented in Primavera. So we wanted to make sure the transition was nice, and you can see here how clean it is and how much information is put on there. So the file in and of itself has a really structured way of representing information. Some of it you can read through plain text through just opening the file, reading through it, but there's some that is encoded in a way that makes it really hard to either understand or to work through to get just if you have the plain file by itself. There's also a lot of data that gets pushed off to the side. It tries to work in this chart format, but the spacing isn't even across all the columns, and so a lot of the information gets pushed and pulled together in different locations, and it becomes really hard to read around the central area when you put a lot of information into one area. And there is a nice tasks and milestones section. There's a lot of information that goes into that, including changes that are made to the task and how it's changing, getting ahead or behind schedule, stuff like that. So there's a lot of information in there, and it took us a lot of time to dig through that and pick out the stuff that we really needed to understand and see inside the project planner. So you can see a little bit of the file here. This is one of the earlier sections, and it's a little bit nicer as far as parts of the file go. You can see a little bit of the encoded data in there with just a bunch of symbols that you can't really understand or interpret when it's in plain text like this. And you can also see how the columns start to get pushed to the side as a lot of information gets put in there that outdoes the spacing that is already given to it. So it gets really confusing really easily. So that's why we took the time to parse through that so we could really get a better understanding of what the file was doing and what we were actually dealing with. So you can see a little bit of the parsed file here. There's a lot of information put in here. You can see how it represents the tables and rows there on the left side. The task IDs, there's a bunch of reference IDs to other parts of the project that you have to look through and really understand how things are connecting. Calendars, projects, all that stuff kind of combines in this section to really determine where things are going. And also at the end here, the % complete, that usually determines if a task is currently in progress, if it's done, if it hasn't started. There's just a lot of stuff going on here and a lot of information that we were trying to work with. So this is a little bit more important for our tasks in the project planner application. So you can see the tags there on the left-hand side of either a task or a milestone. And that really determines for us what kind of visualization we're going to give to it, as well as some of the dates will give that away if they're more or less than one day or something like that, where a task will have a long stretch of time where it's being worked on, whereas a milestone won't. It'll just be one day. And so we can pick that out and really use that to determine if we're going to display it as a bar or as just a symbol, as the black diamond in the visualization. You can see a couple of the other tags that go into there if a task has been completed, or if it's still being worked on, or if it hasn't even been started yet. So all that information gets rolled in up here. So I'll let Joe show you a little bit of what the planner application looks like.
All right, hello everybody, I'm Joe, and I'm going to be going over the technologies we use to actually develop this product, as well as a bit of a video demonstration to show how the product actually works. So this project consists of 3 core components, I would say. The first one being our database, which we have using PostgreSQL, a pretty popular open source database service, and that is then being hosted on Amazon Web Services. That will then connect back through our RESTful API written in Java 8. We did try Java 9 for a while, and that didn't play nice, so we actually ended up rolling back to a more workable version. And so this is written in a pretty popular API framework known as Spring Boot. And that whole interface has been set up to, connect with the database, take in all of our parsing information, handle that kind of processing that Matthew was working on in the actual code implementation, and eventually insert that into the database. Lastly then, from the user experience end, we have our front end, which is a web app written in JavaScript, specifically in React, which is a very popular JavaScript framework made by Facebook. And the idea being that can interface with our API, which can query the database, which can then retrieve all of our newly parsed information. So we have a little video here to demonstrate this, which I'll just start this off. So upon first starting the program, you're presented with a simple login, which we're just going to go ahead and do that right now. Upon logging in, this is your main workspace area. We have functionality for logging out in the top right. And then over there in the middle, we have that upload button, which allows you to upload both file types. We're actually going to start off uploading a Microsoft file, which you can see by that .mpp file extension, and we'll see that that made it in just fine. And now we're going to go ahead and add an additional .xer file extension, which corresponds to the Primavera files, which is what we wanted to be adding in. So both of those have made it in, and what I'm actually going to go do is go into the Microsoft one first. So here's just an example of the Gantt chart. We have our full parent level task up top with all related subtasks below. You have the option to toggle tasks if you want a bit more of a clean presentation. You can also print it out on a physical page, and then that diamond right there is the milestone support that we worked to add in. Now we're going to go back out into the Primavera file, and I'm actually going to pause the video here real quick. So you'll notice that it really does look identical in this design. That's kind of the idea of this whole project, was that you would be able to import project planning types of different file formats, being Microsoft, Primavera, or really anything else that you could find the support for. And the idea being the program would take that information, strip out all the generic and same information, and just present it as this Gantt chart. So essentially at this state in the program, it doesn't really care what file format it is, because they've all been made to be identical data types. And so I'm just going to continue it on. So these tasks are actually all related to each other, which means if you click the top bar, you can actually collapse them down together. And that you'll see we do have 2 milestones on the side there. Toggling support still works and all that stuff. This sidebar here actually does allow you to navigate in between different project files without having to go all the way back up to the parent page. So you can just click a different one from that sidebar, and if you'll see the background just change, you can just jump right over to a different task. Just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit nicer for the user experience. Then you can go back up to the top level. All files do have support to be deleted, which we're just demonstrating right now. And those will clear themselves out of the database permanently. And then lastly, we just log out, and that's about it. And so now I'm going to move on to Brandon, who's going to go over our challenges and the postmortem process.
All right, so starting out, we first initially, when we got the project, we had to get the database set up. We didn't get the credentials from our mentor for a while, so we had to kind of wait on that. And then to set up the database, we had to get an external program called Docker. Docker handles all the automation for us on setting the database up and connecting to it and whatnot. And Docker has a couple of requirements, like you need virtualization enabled, and if you don't, you would have to go into the system BIOS to even change that. And for a couple of us, Docker didn't play nice. Me in particular, I had to get a different version of Docker, not a version, but a different application of Docker, just because it wasn't supported on my computer. And then another challenge we had to work around is our mentor is in Australia. They're in a completely different time zone, so for us it's Tuesday, for him it's Wednesday. Our meetings we held at 8 o'clock at Thursday night, which would be his Friday at 1. And when we first initially got the project, there were pre-existing bugs that we didn't know about until we got to Sprint 4, when we started diving into the front end. The first bug I'll talk about is some of the information would be displayed in a reversed order. This bug rarely happened, so it wasn't a big issue. We did fix it, and the fix we did was just a simple reload the page. The next bug that we spent a good majority of Sprint 4 working on is the print preview bug. And what this bug is when you would go to print a page and it would display the preview, the Gantt chart would be cut off unless you change the window size to be half of the screen. This is because they designed the view of the chart by taking the window width and not the page width. And so unless we were to completely go in and rechange how the Gantt chart is displayed, we couldn't fix this bug. The next bug is the Primavera timestamp bug, and what was happening is some tasks were given a start date of the beginning of Unix time, and in this image here you can see that black line there. It's a bunch of dates all stacked on top of each other because it's going all the way back to Unix start time. We did fix this, and now it's all nice and pretty as you saw in the demonstration. So kind of our post-mortem, this project was very diverse in that we had a database, we had this API to look into, and then we had JavaScript in the front end. So it made it a little more difficult, but at the same time, it presented us with an opportunity to learn more, because now we have all these different areas to learn from, and they were all using languages that are kind of very popular and relevant right now. Some of the stretch goals that we weren't able to get around to that they wanted is showing tasks ahead and behind schedule. So basically we would take today's date and then we would look at the task to see, okay, how much % done is this task, and if so, is it ahead or behind schedule? Next, they also want to be able to edit the charts by clicking on things and dragging them around. So if they want to take, say, task in group 1 and move it to group 2, they could just click, drag, boom, done. And then since the Microsoft file and Xer files were proprietary files and we couldn't actually edit them, they instead wanted a log that would be kind of printed out and showing what edits had been made during the session, so then they could give it to someone to go into actual Primavera program and make the edits there. Any questions?
Couple quick ones. One is a real trivia. You just say delete and it deletes. You might want to come back and say, do you really want to delete?
Not a bad idea.
Trivia. The other was related more to the, you have % complete, and either it probably should show in to do next time, or I thought at one time they wanted to have like a cast bar colored differently for how the % complete. Is that still on a wish list, or did they change their minds?
That ended up getting kind of redesigned into being the showing tasks ahead and behind schedule, which is something that Primavera natively does. So basically that would be represented, rather than being a bar going under the line, it's actually a vertical line that is either ahead of the task, or ahead the task if it's ahead schedule, or behind the task.
Okay, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, we didn't end up getting to that. That was a stretch goal that didn't make it in.
We had some feedback from the mentor already, and he's happy.
Oh, that's good to hear.
I like that.
Were you able to decode all of the tasks that were in those files, or were there certain things that you couldn't represent?
Yeah, the task section is actually really nice, where there's only one section that's actually encoded like that, and it seems to be some sort of ID of some sort that we really couldn't pick out. So a lot of the task data is there, and because we ended up not having to export, it really wasn't necessary to pick that out, since we had the start date, end dates, and all the other stuff in there. So that part ended up being really nice. There's just a lot of other stuff in the file that ends up being something that we lose because there's encoding like that. So.
And then are you able to represent the dependencies between tasks? I didn't see that.
You mean how they're grouped together, or?
Well, you have one task that's dependent upon another task completing, and
Oh, sure.
oftentimes there's a little arrow that connects them.
Right. We didn't get to the arrow. However, tasks are grouped together if they're associated. In the sake of the examples we use in this presentation, they're pretty small. We did have much larger files to work with that were pages long, but they were confidential information provided by our mentor, and they requested that we don't show those in presentations. So yes and no. We didn't get to the arrows, but we do have groupings that shows how tasks depend on one another.
And my last question is, how do you set up users in it?
You basically just click the Create Account button, and it sets up a full authentication process through the API.
Yes, I have one question. So this is primarily for viewing. You can't edit anything in the Gantt chart. Like, oh, a task has gone too long, or oh, that we have completed this task. That has to be re-uploaded every time.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It was initially requested that you could make edits like that, but then once we found out that exporting the file is not legally allowed, it sort of made the editing thing like we could have still added it, but it wouldn't have really served its full purpose in that sense, because you can edit it, but then you can't take it out of the page essentially. But it was an initial request that it ended up getting scrapped because of all that.
Yeah, and the changelog is kind of a compromise between actually editing it and being able to export it. So.
Of
Yes.
all of it, which was the most challenging thing you ran across that was the hardest to figure out and the hardest to overcome, that you actually did overcome? I know some of them you said you couldn't because of proprietary things
I
and
feel
stuff.
we all have a different experience.
Yeah,
with that
yeah,
one.
I
Do I
think
just
we
go
all
down the
have
line?
different- yeah.
Like I'll make you go first. That's cool.
So my biggest thing was probably figuring out the bug for having it come in backwards. For some reason, so it was coming in backwards, as in that all the tasks so you have the title here, and then you have all the tasks as its children. It would come in flipped, and so for some reason that happened, once every 100 times. So it wasn't so much as very tough to fix, but it was very tough to replicate. So it was tough to actually check if my fixes worked, things like that.
Yeah, I think mine was just dealing with the file. There was a lot of stuff inside of it. Getting to parse out really nicely was really difficult and took a lot of time for us to get to that. So I'd say that's mine.
Personally, I'd go with the front end, the React portion of things. I really like Angular. I'm very comfortable with Angular, and so having to shift to a different framework with a different enough syntax, where there was a bit of that cognitive dissonance where it's like I know how to do this in a different way, but I can't figure out how to do it in this way. So figuring out those very subtle differences in how it's actually written.
For me, it was figuring out the print screen bug, because I was new to React and whatnot, so it was difficult kind of figuring out how exactly the Gantt chart was being displayed, and I had to do a lot of digging to eventually figure out where this width variable was and how they were getting it set and whatnot.
So I'm new to all this. Do you guys get to, this is just something when you sign up for a capstone project, you say you're gonna do this for this company and you own nothing, you created something and that's just, you give it back to them. That's kind of the agreement before you start?
Correct. I mean, in a sense, yes. So what we were actually given already a kind of a template, because this was originally created by another capstone group. So things like the authentication and things we never actually had to deal with, but we, in a sense, they said, all right, so here's what we would like out of this, please go do this. And so that's when we have to go and spend a lot of time researching and figuring out how to deal with these technologies that most of us haven't actually heard of.
Yeah, I think in its own right, maybe back on the challenges kind of question, I'm not sure how many other capstone groups did have basically they were given a previously existing product to work on. A lot of them had the freedom of choice to design it from the ground up themselves in a language they were comfortable with, in something they knew. In our case, we were handed something that was, 3/4 done, but fully designed by different people with different backgrounds, different education, and so you're essentially trying to read someone else's work, which in our case, the documentation was a little threadbare, which made that more challenging. But yeah, it's like in its own right, it kind of let us figure out quite a lot of things. Like I think everything that was in this project we have never learned in school. So we really did learn all of it, at least language-wise, from the ground up, which was a little challenging, but I think an overall good experience.
I mean, really.
That's the goal of a capstone, get you ready for industry.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this project did a good job about not just having us learn these new technologies and things, but also having us read other people's code and really understand it, so that way we can add to it and make it better.
I gained a lot of appreciation for writing documentation. That's like good.
I mean, the reality is that's the way the world is.
Mm-hmm.
Leave here and go into a profession, you're going to start on something somebody else
Yep.
worked on, and it's a good experience. Not every software engineer out of school gets to create something from the ground up.
Great, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Hello everyone, we are the Capstone Group working with Capturis. My name is Bryce Ketterling.
Jamie. Servani.
And I'm Ruben.
And about Capturis, Capturis is a NIST company that works with multi-site businesses to help them manage information and help them track costing as well as utility information and help them pay bills on time and help schedule paying their bills.
So this is a team we've been working with from Capturis. Wendy and David are our sponsors, and Royce is our technical mentor. So the problem we were given is Capturis uses a third-party vendor to test data entry applicants. This can get kind of costly, especially considering how many people they have to test. And the results can expire.
So the solution that we were tasked to build with, to build, is the 10-key assessment tool, and that utilizes the 10-key pad on the keyboard. So that this assessment calculates KPH and also accuracy, and accuracy is kind of determined by how many keystrokes a user can enter, as well as how many errors the individual makes on the assessment.
So the solution we came up with is, this is kind of a flow of what it would look like. You'll go from the login page if you haven't already registered to the registration page, and then once you register, you put all your name, email, all that good stuff, and then you go to the login page and log in, and you go to the user dashboard where you see 4 assessments. There'll be a date format, date, like I mentioned, whole number, decimal, and then a mixture of all 3. And then you can also see the history of tests that you've taken in the past. So once you select a test, you have 3 options of time: 1 minute, 3 minute, or 5 minute. While you're taking the test, the countdown will begin. Once you're done, you'll see your results. So you'll see your KPH, your accuracy, and then the number of backspaces you've hit. From there, you can log out or go back and take another test. You can also log in if you were a manager and see the user's results, what test they took, the date, and the KPH as well. And then you can also log out from there.
So the tools that we use for this, we use Postgres database to store the information about our users. We used Java for the back-end logic and Angular for the front-end design. We used GitHub to store all of our files for the project, and Google Hangout to hang out with our sponsors, and Google Drive to store our documents for the class, our SRS documents, weekly reports. We use Jetty to host the server locally, and we use CAPTCHA to prevent spam from robots for the server, so nothing harmful gets in the database.
So kind of the schedule or rundown of how we made our project was weeks 2 through 5 were kind of preparation, making sure none of us really had experience in Angular before, so just using tutorials and learning how to use that properly so we could start our designs. We did get our UI designs made and approved, and then we also got our database set up. Then weeks 6 through 7 we did connections with the database and our server as well. Then week 8, which was about midterm, we did design some of the pages based off the UI and then also routed them. So then week 9 through 11, we started designing the pages some more, experimented with Java. Weeks 12 through 14, we did some more connectivity, trying to get connections everywhere. I know we had quite a bit of issues, and we were very thankful that Royce helped us out with that. Brushing up on pages, we did several iterations of those to make sure they're efficient and well done. And then, of course, week 16, just final touches, design improvements, testing it, as well as adding CAPTCHA as well.
This is a use case diagram. We did kind of talk about this a little bit already, but basically an applicant will be able to register for an account, then go take assessments and view their results, take more assessments, and a manager will be able to view those results.
These are some of the user points that we did accomplish. So we had a total of 55 user points and we accomplished 46, so about 85% of that. These are the ones we for sure finish up, just like adding CAPTCHA, like I said, authenticating users, setting up a database, doing our UI design. So the things we did accomplish, we're quite proud of. I think we did a good job.
And here on the screen now, you can see our ERD. This is the updated one, the final one. So basically, we designed the database in such a way that each component in our application will kind of tie back to a table here in our database. So the user login table kind of has just pertinent information to the login itself. Assessment user will have most of the registration and like some other things about it, such as like the role ID, so you can see what kind of role a user is. And then we have lookup tables, such as the user role and assessment type here, that are just, it's easier to work with integers in a database, so it's just easier to look up descriptions and stuff without having to store the strings. And then the assessment and each assessment result that a user will have will be tied into the assessment result and the assessment table.
And these are kind of the general steps we took this semester. Created a front-end and back-end environment. We designed the UI and then designed the pages based on those designs. We switched from Java to Node.js back to Java. We were having trouble with Java, so we thought, oh, Node.js is going to be easier, and it wasn't. So we went back to Java and asked Royce for help. Implemented some new elements. We'll show off some of those later. Connected to the database, did some documentation, and verified and authenticated users, and then implemented CAPTCHA.
Some of the risk and issues that we have were quite a few, but we tackled all of them. One would be like cheating on the test. You might get a great score, it might not be you, so you'd come into the facility and then take it. We had goals for ourselves and as a group for each sprint, and we were able to meet those for the most part. Like I mentioned, the framework was a learning curve, and we were able to I think for the most part, learn efficiently and get through the project. I haven't set up an environment before, so I know that was a little bit exciting and getting that all set up. And then we did have some server issues we got fixed, as well as, like you mentioned, switching from Java to Node.js and back. And then we were limited due to time constraints on the pages we could do, but the pages we did get done efficiently and nicely, and they look nice. And then we did have some database flow issues, but they're all working beautifully. So I know a lot of those overlap into the issues, but I'll talk about the ones that don't, like standard for coding. We all try to comment everything to make sure when we do give it to you guys, it's not terrible and you know what we're doing and it's not a jumbled mess. And then also we redefined some roles, we added the timer properly, and stuff like that. So for our demo, where is it?
One more, couple more times.
Okay.
Not switch over.
It's not going. Oh no.
Well, that's not good.
Do you want me to look?
Go to the PowerPoint. I'm sorry. I'll fix this quick.
We're having technical issues.
Sorry about this.
Should we go? Okay.
Goodness. Must be. Goodness. Perfect.
So the weather outside is a little frightful.
So here you can see the login page. A user can log in if they have credentials. If they are a new user, they can go ahead and click that create an account button, and it will generate, or it'll switch them over to the register page. Here, basically all we're looking for is demographic information about the user, so their first name, last name, email, and stuff like that. The email and the phone number will have a mask, so it's kind of showing what we're expecting in terms of format, and then the password and the username will be there for people to go in and enter their credentials and then confirm password. All of this comes with authentication and stuff like that, and verification. So if let's say a user already exists in the database, it will tell them and it will say, hey, sorry, you have to enter a new username. Or if the email already exists, same thing. If the passwords don't match, it will generate an error and say, hey, passwords need to match. And then the job code there, that will be talked a little bit later. It's in the manager page specifically. And then down below will be the CAPTCHA. So that will also generate an error if you don't hit that. Hopefully it just accepts you. Perfect. And so she can log in as herself, that she just created the account. And it will get you to the manager dashboard page here. It comes with each of the 3 different types and a mix of the different assessments you can take, and then a 1, 3, and 5 minutes variation in all of them. And at the bottom there's also a history table, which is not populated at this time because we have not taken any assessments. So why don't we go ahead and Jamie will speak more about that.
So here's our assessment page. Timer will start on your first key press. We're calculating keystrokes per hour based on every keystroke except for enter and backspace. Accuracy is calculated by comparing the values you enter to the values you're supposed to enter. And that's all done in the back end. And we also keep a count of backspaces to see how many times you mess up and then go fix it.
For these tests, you also cannot actually finish it before the timer's done. There's no actual end to it. It actually just randomly generates new numbers every time the list depletes.
Right, it generates them live, real time, so.
And a lot of proofing went into this. We had to make sure, what would happen if a user would type a lot of gibberish and then copy maybe delete all of it and see what would happen. Hopefully we fixed all of that.
So here's the results page. You'll be able to see your KPH accuracy and how many backspaces you hit. That's obviously a really impressive score. About one too many backspaces, but pretty good.
Oh, yep, I guess we just need to scroll down. But yep, so as you can see there, it populated with all the results that we just calculated with her, or when she took the exam or the assessment. And so it shows there in the history table. We did a whole number, and so we're going to do a mix and show you a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, this one's a little bit more difficult just because you'll have different formats, and you'll also have to type in the decimal point and the slashes on dates. So if you're really trying to maximize your score, it's probably not the best idea to take this.
This should probably be the most authentic, what the captures would be looking for.
Right, it's probably going to give you closest to what your actual average data entry would be.
I'm obviously a very good typer.
Yeah, this isn't on her screen in front of her.
Right, she has to look
It's
at
on
them.
Extend, so usually she'd be flying through this.
Yeah, I did quite a few of these tests in my day.
Yeah. Just because we've tested it so much, we're all pretty much experts at data entry now. So.
Oh no. Okay. Shoot, where am I? Okay.
Are you not in the textbooks anymore?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so
I know.
accuracy a little bit better there. Can't do much better than that, but and KPH improved. So.
Yep, and then if she scrolls down there, there'll be even more. It accurately displays it there on the user history table. And so then we also have, if you are a manager, if you have manager credentials, you can log in as the manager and see everybody's results and stuff like that. So you can see, we basically pull in every person's assessment and their assessment results and their name and stuff like that. You'll see it here. There it is. All of that, including the job code. The job code is something that Captchurus wanted us to implement. It's basically to search on what would probably happen is somebody would they would send an email to an applicant, and the applicant would receive this with probably a job code, and the job code would be kind of to determine like, oh, when did this person take this assessment, or like what, maybe like they have like a round of applicants they wanted, so they give them a specific job code to search by and stuff like that. And this table you can sort. We implemented a specific type of table called an NGX table, data table. It can sort, if you just click on it, it'll sort by any field that you want. So
Ascending.
yep, ascending or descending. And then same thing for all those. They should be pretty similar at this time. We also implemented filter. Once you start typing, it will filter in real time on the field that it thinks that you are looking to filter by. So if she says she did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it matched job code, so it pulled all of that there. If she got out and maybe typed beats or something, it would just pull the first 3. So there we are. And yeah.
How do we get back here?
Yeah, go ahead and just hit that at the bottom there. Yep, oops. Let's try this one. More technical difficulties per usual.
Cool beans. Reflection time. So some of our learning experiences we had was, like I mentioned quite a few times, Angular was one that we've all, I think, are very well at now. Setting up everything was definitely something we all grew from, including creating a database and just like making sure and updating it as we go, because sometimes you realize, oh, you created it and you're like, I don't really need this table, do I? So really doing that, as well as designing the pages and making sure they look nice and you're not just submitting it last minute, but taking the time to make it look good. And also, I know Ruben and Royce have spent quite a bit of time just fixing all the connections that we have with the help of Royce as well.
Right. Yes, and we're really appreciative of Royce. He's been a really big help to our project. Some setbacks. Java, not necessarily as a whole, but we haven't had any experience or very limited experience in setting like REST API and anything with the back end and hooking all that up. So it was a little bit of a learning experience, of course. IntelliJ, again, not really IntelliJ as a whole, but IntelliJ, it's a very powerful tool, has a lot to offer, and it's an overwhelming amount of information, kind of. So to new users such as ourselves, it was a little hard to kind of know what we wanted specifically, and so we asked Royce and his team over at Capturis to help us out with that. And then connections, again, like I said, with the Java thing, front end to back end and data traversal all the way through. We haven't had really experiences with that, so it set us back a couple weeks. But once we figured that out, it was a breeze.
We did a lot of team bonding. I can say that these guys are some of my best friends, and we also, I think, bonded with our sponsors because we met them every week, and we have jokes, some cupcakes, you never know. And then we weren't the best in the beginning at putting stuff on GitHub, but we were the worst, to quote Jamie, and we are a lot better at it now. We have pushed quite a bit up, and as the school ends, we'll also keep adding our documentation and our final touches as well. Wow. Does anyone have any questions?
I got a couple little things. Just when you're doing the test, why do you show what's coming next?
I guess this is it's just to kind of prepare the users so they kind of know. I guess there isn't necessarily a big reason, but we have, when we were looking at other 10-key assessments that are online and kind of offered, they also did the same thing. And we kind of want to model ours off of another 10-key assessment that somebody else or some other people built online. And we were thinking, this is a good format. This is kind of a standard. We kind of wanted to follow a standard for a 10-key assessment. So that's pretty much the only reason, I think.
And I think, if I remember right, that's something that we decided, like with Capturis, that they wanted to. I don't remember.
Just to kind of chip in, psychologists who've looked at stuff like that, once you've started typing a number, you should start looking at the next one, because you're not even consciously thinking if you're a good typer. So as soon as you can pull in and process another number, you're able to, your hands are just going to go. So it's like piano players. You don't look at what you're playing, you're looking what's coming up.
So we definitely did put some psychological research into it. So
kind of from like a design standpoint, you'd be maybe looking at a piece of paper, there'd be a list of data entry to put in, so it'd kind of be based off of that.
And then the other one, where you're filtering, you you kind of pick whichever based on what they're doing? What if you have beats as a type and beats as a name?
Right, so that's kind of just going off of whatever Angular material.io kind of has. It's just how they, I think, filter. We were looking at some of the documentation, and it appears to kind of just filter on what it best thinks that it is trying to filter by.
It'll show everything. Like if one entry has, let's say, name, that's the same as, I don't know, early.
Like if type was beats, and I think I get what you're getting at. I think if type was beats and if job code was beats, it'd actually pull both in. So because you're filtering by beats, so it'd say, oh, this matches beats, pull them both in. So, any other questions?
Sure.
Yes.
Kind of what are the plans from here? Are there other features that should be implemented, or is this kind of mostly a complete system with a little bit of maintenance work? Or
yeah, mostly complete with a little bit of maintenance work. As we said, we've completed about 85% of what we actually were assigned with. Some of the things were stretch goals, some of them were not. I know one thing that we did not 100% get was the admin page. Admin page was basically supposed to show all users, and you would be able to kind of go and change their roles and assign them different roles, maybe change some demographic information about them, and potentially even unlock their account if a user was locked out. However, we did not get this 100% implemented, so we did not get it in our demo. Yeah, and then
admin role as a whole as well. We didn't get to the admin role.
Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I noticed when Ani was creating the new user account, somebody else's username came in, like Ruben popped in.
Yep. That's just autocomplete that I have on my computer, I guess, from Chrome. It has nothing to do with the application
So
itself.
it didn't like pull it from the database.
No, absolutely not. No,
He
there's
signed in a few too many times, so
Yeah.
it's
The
saved.
reCAPTCHA, I mean, that's awesome that that's in there. Did you guys? I noticed it didn't pop the annoying picture that you have to.
It actually did when I was testing it, and I
Right.
had to find all the buses. So it kind of it
Yeah,
will.
after so many tries, I think, or maybe if we even do it in incognito mode. I know right before here we did do a trial run once before, and it did pop up with buses. That's what she's talking about, I guess. And we were like, oh, this would be amazing. It popped up in the demo. Maybe not, but it will pop up with specific
I was just
things.
curious if you had invisible turned on or if it was B2, so that's good. Did the clock go negative on the test?
Yep, that's one thing we are planning on fixing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't even 100% know why, but it hits 0 and then it goes to what? It does like a -1 ...
I
or
don't
something.
even think it hits 0. I think it just goes to -1.
No,
It
it
hits
hits 0
it
and then
hits
goes
0.
Yeah.
And then we had talked in our last meeting about being able to see the way what you keyed in versus what actually came up afterwards in the results. Is that something that didn't make it?
That did not make it. Yes, you're correct. Also, I mean, just in terms of like the scope of the project, I wasn't 100% sure if that's something we did want to implement because, I mean, do we truly want to kind of show the user what they missed and what they didn't? And we probably could. We are saving the what is expected compared to what they actually entered. So we probably could put it in. However, for this demonstration, we did not include it. Any other questions?
I guess also
Yes.
on the last time we met, there was a bug we found about pressing back and not logging out correctly. Was that bug fixed?
Not for this demonstration. However, when we release it or give it to you guys, it will be for sure.
Okay. And I guess how do you guys plan on fixing that bug?
So as a little fix here, we decided to, for each page, we are just going to look for in the session storage if there exists a key for user ID, and if not, then we'll redirect them to the login page. Otherwise, the user will be authenticated. Now, the security of a session storage may be or may not be. You may or may not be able to change that very easily. I'm not 100% sure. If that is the case, we can also integrate something where we can take your recommendation and store something in the database, and also check if this user is supposed to be logged in, so they went through the login page. We can also add that in. That's not that big of a fix at all.
Okay.
So is that okay?
Yep, I'm just thinking that security should always be on the database side, because session storage, you can double click on it and you can edit it.
Mhm.
And so now you can edit in, or you can now become a manager or the admin
Gotcha. Okay.
through that. And also, I guess another thing with security, I remember, I think it was Jamie that said something about, what was it, Price? I think Price said something about two-factor authentication at midterm. Was that ever discussed again? Was that ever?
I wouldn't know. I don't remember anything about two-factor, but yeah, we could look at it probably.
I'm not entirely sure. I guess we haven't discussed it any further since midterm. I think that might have been just another stretch goal if we got time to for it, but I don't think we'll get time for it, I guess.
Yeah, I think we were more concerned about CAPTCHA.
Yeah, I guess it was in the same sentence as CAPTCHA.
Ah.
Okay. Memory's not that good, sorry.
All right.
Any other questions or?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Alex.
I'm Juan.
I'm Nick.
Quinn, and we're NAU Country Project.
So NAU Country is a crop insurance company. They provide crop insurance to 48 of the states across the United States. They're part of the QBE Insurance Group. It's a company based out of Australia. They're considered the top 20 insurers internationally and in the Australia's largest global insurer. And they develop a whole bunch of different softwares for getting quotes, managing policies, getting you crop mapping. They do all sorts of other development for different insurance needs, depending on what a customer needs. And for our project, for them, we designed a 360-degree review system. You can either do it based on a project or based on like an individual that had participated in a project if they wanted self-feedback for how they personally did on this project. So they used to distribute the survey just by printed copy. You'd fill it out, and then someone would have to collect all the printed copies, take all that data, input it into a system, and then, go through, analyze all the data, and then distribute out the necessary data to whoever, whether it be a manager, whether it be the individual that the survey was about, so they could understand. And it was just a long and lengthy process. So our group took and automated this process so that it was a web app that anybody could take, and the data would be collected and then analyzed pretty much instantaneously. So we kind of just shortened up the process. They also do this to collect data to see how teams do together, how well they work together, and where they can adjust to make things work a little better. They have their 4 C's, which is a lot of how they organize their questions and their surveys, and it's just to test like communication skills amongst groups, collaboration, so like how well groups do together, the critical thinking, and creativity. And that was a big part of how we had to organize our data down at the end. And with that.
And for our solution, like he said, we created a web-based survey application using ASP.NET Core MVC framework for the flexibility. It provides a faster and better review system for the company. And
for our first 2 sprints, we received our project. We got our know-how for what MVC is. We had a little issues in the beginning, but we had a little bit of a learning curve. We got through it. We had to create a specification document, and we created our first survey page, an admin view, and the login page as well. We also began work on our database schema in sprint 1 and 2. And in sprint 3 and 4, we began work on link generation and the email functionality in it within the app. Ability to save questions based on a database or based on a survey ID and question ID to associate them together. Finalize the link generation mechanism and email in-app ability. And finally updating the database to save the results properly, because we had a few issues with different types of questions not saving correctly, and we fixed the survey.
For our demonstration.
Here's our login page. It searches through an administrator table. So each administrator has its own username. We just put a generic one user and gave it a generic password as well.
And this is the admin view page. So basically they'd have a couple options to choose between creating a survey, creating a group, creating categories, or creating a user. And also just viewing the groups and surveys, categories, and results. Just create a quick group. And here it'll display the other groups that are existing within the database, and the admin would get the choice of either editing, viewing the details, or deleting the group. For categories,
You just have the 4 C's for now for categories.
And so if they wanted to go about creating a new survey, you just go to the first link here to create a survey, click on that. It would pull up just this entry page where you could type in the name for the survey. You could do individual or project. We'll just go with project for now. If you click individual, then you have to type in a name in this category for which individual the survey would be about, and that'd be associated with them and one of the databases. So, and if you don't fill in this information, it will just reload this page and give you an error. So then once you go create, it'll just pull up this. So far we have 0 questions entered into our survey, but you can go here, you can enter a question, Q1, then you can choose free text or a number scale, and you can pick which one of the 4 C's it would be associated with. So once you do that, you hit add question, it'll bring it back up and allow you to continue adding questions. You can go through, add as many questions as you would like, choosing whichever specifications you need for them. It'll just keep adding questions to it. Once you're done adding whatever questions you felt necessary, you can come down here, you just hit the save button, it'll save it, and then it'll bring you to the list of surveys that have already been created. We just have some pre-populated ones to show that there are multiple surveys that have been created so far. And from there, you can choose to send the survey, so you can email it out to the people that you would need taking this survey, whoever's within the project, or individuals reviewing other individuals. So you just hit send survey. It brings up this. You select which individuals you'd like it to go to. It just brings down a drop-down list of everybody in the database. So we'll send it to Nick, hit add recipient. It'll show that Nick's been now added to the list of recipients that will receive this survey. We'll give it a subject. And you'll hit send email. If any of this information isn't filled out, whether there's not a recipient, there's no subject line, no body, it will refresh this page and give you an error saying that you're missing one or another piece of the information in order to send it. Once you send the email, it'll just bring you back to the main page and allow you to either continue creating surveys, editing groups, or doing anything of that nature. And
And did we get it?
Is that select the right email?
Are we in the right one?
Got the email.
You got the
refresh
email?
it. Where? Like the web page. Top or the.
Oh, come on, baby. There we go.
Oh, now you closed it.
Great.
Just click on Gmail down there.
There we go. Cool. Oh, and it came from me. We have just right now, my email is used for sending out emails. It can be hard-coded or search through a database, whichever you prefer. Come on, baby. And this link generation, it just has the generic website in the front end. And then we use the link generation where it uses a specific ID for the survey that you created. If you noticed last one, the survey ID was 1008 for the one we just created. So, and my participant ID is 8 in our survey, so it would be who's ever it's unique to the person you sent it to. And click the link. This cannot be displayed. Are we still running?
Yes.
We are. I don't know what's up. Well, all right then.
Try sending another one.
We can try sending another one.
View surveys.
And view surveys. Let's just send a different one. New recipients. Add another one. There we go. Test 2. Hooray. There we go.
You have to go back to the inbox.
This is inbox. Another one. Yay. Come on. Yes. There we go. Alright. These are just generic questions. Answer. And if you do not answer all the questions, it will give you an error. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. Answer 2. Let's submit to it. Thank you. It's been recorded. Now you can just exit out. And if we go back to the admin page.
So, viewing results is basically it'll come to a page that has all the completed surveys in the database. I believe we just did final test 2. So we're going to hit view details here. So basically, this was a project survey. So we'll have the question, then we'll have the overall average, and for each group that was participating in the survey, it'll be filled out here. There's only one group, it was project manager, so you can see the answers here. And all the comments displayed below. There's definitely some test data in here since it was not the one we just created, so there's some existing stuff, but and if you click view details, you can see some of the individual results to see who answered what. As you can see, there's multiple answers from this, just because we were doing some testing with this. We'll go back to some other completed surveys. I had a couple different ones with just some dummy data filled in, so to better show off exactly all the different results we want. So this one, we have an individual survey. As you can see, this was a survey about Tina. you can see the question, the average that all of her peers answered about her, as well as her own answer, and again the comments below. So you can see basically just be open-ended comments explaining how they felt about her performance or whatever the case may be. And then again, you can see all of these individual results that was answered by each participant in the survey. And then one other project survey with some extra data. So there's 2 groups in here. You can see the averages from each group and then the overall average as well. And again, you can see all the various scores by each individual. So basically it shows off all of the different results you'll be able to see. One thing wanted to go back to, it wasn't mentioned before, we have the ability to create users. So basically this username will just be the email address that you want for participants participating in a survey, or whatever the recipient may be for a particular survey. As you can see, you can go and edit this, select whichever group you want. So I guess we can go to, I'll edit Tina real quick. Which is this new group we made, save that. I believe, alright, sorry. If you go to a different user, I just want to show off that we can create the, show the different display of groups in a survey results. Save that, complete surveys. And as you can see, the next, that was split up since we added the group of this individual user, we can see that their results are displayed differently in a separate group. But yeah, that is a basic demonstration of our application. Going back to some of the issues and risks we have ran into along the way, initially MVC was a bit of a learning curve, as mentioned before, just getting used to the different components, views, models, and controllers, just how they interact with each other was something new, and we just had to get used to that. As mentioned before, also mentioned, saving, we had some issues around saving questions, basically just determining the different types between comments and individual numerical responses was somewhat difficult to get it all to display properly and save in the database. And along the way, we had to do a lot of changing and updating on the database, working with entity framework classes, making sure everything is associated properly, and just making sure all the keys are working properly to get all this data displayed and stored the right way. Some of the things post-mortem after this project, we got a really good learning experience with real-world software development, some of the challenges we faced, working with stakeholders as just different from various projects we've worked on before. Things we might do differently, probably schedule, assign tasks better, just overall better organization would have gone a long way towards meeting some of the possible stretch goals that we had in mind that we didn't end up getting to. Moving on to that, so some of the next steps, some of the stretch goals that NAU country had for us is being able to display like results in different colors and graphs, just to be able to view data, be able to determine, just easier on the eyes, separating data and making it look all nice. Also some functionality for saving progress, so you'd be able to save your progress mid-survey, like if someone's taking a survey, you can save it, come back. We did not get to that. And also including reminders for people that have forgotten to take a survey or not yet taking it. But as mentioned, we have not taken that, so those are the things that we see as the next steps for this project. questions?
So the survey, it looks like you can take the survey more than once. Is that by design or?
That is not by design. We did not, I guess, create the functionality, or we didn't get around to that. So that's probably something that NAU will definitely want to look into. As you can see, there was multiple results from one person. So basically, we just have to make sure that like this link disappears, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, that's not by design.
And then you had, when you're creating the survey, you had the ability to create text input or the scale, the number scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you think of other options like Boolean, true, false, or yes, no?
As far as that, they mostly wanted just like comment based and then a scale based for the design of how their questions are. It's one of the big things. So I guess we could add more functionality to offer yes, no, or true or false questions, but it was mostly just they wanted a scale and comments based surveys.
There's a web page error that popped up a couple times. Is that a known problem that's going to be fixed?
I guess that was actually yesterday when we were testing it. We didn't have any issues with the emailing, so I'm not sure what went wrong there. I guess we'd have to look into it and see. Maybe it just mistyped the link or something happened with the emailing. But yeah, we were unaware of that issue until a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I guess, did you guys ever talk about an option for anonymous surveys? Just because, for me personally, if I'm going to do a survey about my boss, and he knows I'm doing it, I'm going to say, oh yeah, he's the best person ever. But if it's anonymous, I might say, oh yeah, he tends to stink a little bit, like he might be stuff. Was anonymous surveys ever on the table?
As far as the requirements that we got and our understanding, they definitely wanted to be able to determine who answered what about certain people, and admins are the only people who will be able to view these results. So we could take away the functionality to like view each individual response, I guess. That might be something that in the future they want, and just display averages based on their peers and not throw any certain person under the bus or what have you.
Any other questions?
So if we wanted to keep this and use it for peer reviews, it would work pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it should.
I think it would work pretty all right.
Just gotta change the NAU stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, we are the Apereo Capstone team. I'm Madeline Leonard.
I'm Cole Kynes.
I'm Tyler Rupert.
And I'm Devin Alexander.
Really quickly, we just want to thank Alex and Dean for all their hard work this semester putting together the capstone projects. And we also want to thank Ken, I'm sure he'll see the video since he's not here, from Apereo for being so helpful and understanding throughout this whole process. Yes. Okay. So our presentation today will be split into 5 parts. I'll go over the introduction. Tyler and Cole will be going over the progress since the midterm presentation. And then we'll have an awesome demo video to show you guys. And finally, a reflection. So here's a brief overview of Apereo. Apereo creates innovative electronic and software solutions for manufacturers and consumers. One of their products is the Stratus 2, which is the product that we were working with during our capstone time. Apereo has 3 locations. One of them is our own NDSU Tech Park, which is where our mentor Ken Paulus works as the software development manager. All right, next one. So Apereo Stratus 2 device provides a lot of vital information to the pilot, including GPS location, altitude, ground speed, vertical speed, a lot of stuff. What we're tapping with in our project is only about 4% of what the Stratus can actually do. One of the things the Stratus cannot do, though, is it's not a display device. You can see a picture of it there. There's no screen or anything, so there's no way for the Stratus to relay that information back to the pilot. So that's why they require a mobile application to do that for them. Right now, they partner with ForeFlight, who has a third-party application. But for Apereo, that means that they have less control, and it's also going to be longer between updates to the Stratus to reflect updates to the app. So Apereo asked us to create a mobile application for them that they can manage in-house. Since Apereo uses mostly iOS native development in their building, we decided to make sure that the mobile app would also be iOS native so that it's easier to maintain, easier to upgrade with more features. Some of the requirements given to us by Apereo were a tracking mode and normal mode. So the way that it displays the tracking mode, the camera will be behind the plane as the plane is moving, and the normal mode will be with the compass always facing north, so you can see the plane moving across the map. It also tracks a flight path, so you can see where you've flown. And then we also display the speeds and the altitude. We also show the Stratus battery life and the Stratus signal strength. And then our personal goals for the application were to make the interface easy to use and easy to read. We wanted it to be pretty. It's a mobile application, especially an iOS mobile application, so we wanted to make sure that it fit the bill.
All right, so the progress that we made on our application, we successfully got the application to work on an iPad, which you'll see it being used on one during the demo. The flight data is all accurate, so like nothing's showing up and giving the pilots the wrong information. And the user interface is simple to use. It looks pretty close to how we initially planned on it. And it still has all the functions that we initially had planned. Going over our schedule over the semester, every week we met on Thursdays. There were 2 weeks where we couldn't meet in person. We met online. And we've made pretty good progress weekly. Some of the highlights being finishing the back end and adding the map functionality, implementing the tracking mode, and finishing the UI. If you look at the dates, you can see originally we had selected MapKit in February, and in the beginning of April we had to switch to Google Maps. That was kind of a bit of a problem that we'll go over later. But that was basically our whole semester there. Now I'm going to go over some of the risks. Our group was relatively new to Stratus and aviation technology, with the exception of me with aviation, since I'm a private pilot. But aside from that, all of us are pretty unsure about where to start from and all that. But it ended up turning out that all we had to do was pull data from the Stratus, so we didn't need to know a whole lot of that to begin with, as far as how much we thought we were going to. Another one is we were all new to map technologies. This is definitely probably the biggest hurdle in our whole project. We all had to spend a pretty considerable amount of time reading up on it and working with it, and even towards the end, like, we were still having issues with some of the stuff like the offline mapping, but aside from that, we got basically all the stuff we needed to figured out. And then the last risk there, we were worried about being able to implement a flight path when we were switching from MapKit to Google Maps. As it turns out, they both have support for it, so it didn't really end up being a problem. And now Cole is going to go out over the issues.
Okay, so we had three major issues that we had to face throughout the development of the app. The first issue was an issue with the timeout exception. So it wasn't so much of a hindrance of development of the app, but more of something that got in the way a lot. So to notify the user when they had not properly connected to the Stratus, we implemented a timeout function or feature, I suppose, where after 10 seconds of not receiving any data from the Stratus, it would pop up an error message saying, hey, you need to connect to the Stratus. The issue that we had with this was when we were dealing with anything else in the application, such as testing out the map buttons, such as the compass or tracking, or working with the zoom buttons, testing out the map gestures like rotation, and the person testing had not connected to the Stratus. We only had one Stratus device when we were testing with this, and I had it most of the time. A timeout exception would pop up constantly, every 10 seconds. So this wasn't so much as a deal breaker for us, but it was more of just something that really got in the way of our development. The next issue that we had was with MapKit. This was an issue that persisted for a long time throughout the development of our application. MapKit, which is Apple's native map SDK, does not support offline maps. One requirement for this project was the use of offline maps because the Stratus itself works as a Wi-Fi network, so you have to sacrifice connecting to another network to connect to the Stratus. Therefore, you can't pull in new map data dynamically, so we need offline maps. We could not use MapKit because of this, so we had to look at other third-party map SDKs such as Google Maps, which we eventually went with, or Mapbox, something that we seriously considered for a while. But these other third-party SDKs, because they're not native to iOS, they had their own set of issues that came along with them, which we ended up with going with Google Maps, and well, we'll go over the issues that we had with that right now. So, in the implementation of Google Maps, as I said, we cannot dynamically load maps. So what we're planning to do is use Google Maps, essentially turn off its map functionality, so it'd just be a blank screen that supports a bunch of map functions. And then we'd use what's called an overlay. We load in our own map. The issue with this, like I said before, Google Maps is a third-party map application. So in order to load in these overlays, we had to use another third-party application called Google Map iOS Utils. The problem with Google Map iOS Utils is that it is broken on iOS. It does not work properly. And they don't tell us that. So for quite a bit of time, we tried to get that up and running, only to find out that it does successfully load in the overlays that we wanted to use, but it is unusably slow. When trying to rotate the map, it took a minute to load the rotation. And when you're flying in a plane at 300 miles an hour, you can't wait a minute for your map to load. That doesn't work. So because of this, we didn't even know that it was a third-party application that was breaking it. So because of this, we actually ended up looking at using Mapbox, the other third-party app SDK that we're looking at using. And thankfully, before we did that, we checked out to see what was going wrong with Google Maps a third time, just to make sure we knew what the issue was, and found out that it was the third-party SDK. We removed that, and unfortunately in removing that we weren't able to load a map overlay, and so technically right now our application is not using offline maps, which is the only thing that we were not able to complete in the development of this application. But that is not a deal breaker right now, because if you connect to a Wi-Fi network, load in your map before you start a flight, and then connect to the Stratus, you do get a map and it does still work as expected. It's just that you can't load in an entire offline map while flying. And now we will move on to the demo. Because the Stratus does not work indoors, it pulls in a lot of satellite data, GPS data, and stuff like that. We won't be able to show you a live demo, so we made a video for you right here.
Hey guys, before we give a demonstration on how the user end of the application works, I thought it might be interesting to give a brief overview on the backend too. Basically, the backend starts with receiving data over 2 sockets from the Stratus device. Every time one of these sockets updates, the new data is then pushed through the system to update the UI. Before the data reaches the UI, it is sent through a parser that breaks it down into meaningful bits of information and packages it into a structure the UI can understand. Since multiple sockets are being used, this package needs to be updated asynchronously. After each socket updates, the package is then sent to the main UI to handle the update of the relevant UI elements. In the main UI, the Stratus dashboard elements are updated. Right now, you may not know what the dashboard elements are, but this will be covered later on in the other portion of this video. From here, other bits of information relevant to mapping data are sent to the map UI. Here, a plane icon is plotted at the Stratus' longitude and latitude, and the icon is rotated to match the Stratus' cardinal orientation. And there you have it. That is roughly how the back end of the application works. And we will now move to the other part of the demonstration, where Devin will be discussing the user end.
Upon launching the application, a connection to the Stratus device is attempted. If the application fails to make this connection, it will prompt the user with an error message. There is no need to fear, however, as the solution to this issue is usually as simple as connecting to the Stratus' wireless interface. After the connection has been established, the location of the user is found and flight data is shown in a dashboard on the right side of the screen. At the top of the dashboard are the status icons showing the Stratus' remaining battery life as well as the strength of the connection to the Stratus' wireless interface. Below the status icons are the 3 flight metrics. These metrics provide necessary information a user will need during a flight. The first metric measures the user's altitude above the MSL, or mean sea level. The next metric displays the ground speed of the aircraft. Think of this as the equivalent to the speedometer on a motor vehicle. Lastly, we have the vertical speed, which measures the user's descent. One thing the user may notice the dashboard does not have is the user's location. But fear not, as this bit of information is always one tab away over on the map view. Along with this, the Maps UI comes packaged with the usual zoom in and zoom out buttons, as well as buttons for the compass and entering flight tracking mode. The user may notice that the compass button has a needle that always points north by default. When this is the case, the map is in normal view. When the user taps the button, however, the map will rotate to point in the direction of travel. This map state is called the flight view and is useful for when the user wants to view the map from the perspective of the plane. When the user presses the flight tracking mode button, the map enters the flight tracking mode state. In this state, the map is oriented to the flight view and a path that represents the user's history of travel is drawn. Aside from the map's UI, there are the three basic map gestures: zoom, pan, and rotate. Notice that when the user performs any of these gestures, the map stops following the plane. The quick fix to this is as simple as pressing the compass button to orientate the plane to the center of the map view. We hope that this demonstration gave an ample description on how the user utilizes the Stratus interface application to interact with the Stratus device.
And there you go.
Okay, so now we will discuss the big takeaways that we had from our post-mortem. Overall, we're very pleased with the progress that we've made. We've completed almost all of the user story points, and we've delivered a product that we're all very pleased with, and we're very proud of ourselves that we've delivered this. It met Ken's approval as well, which is definitely the bigger deal. Our offline map didn't work, as Cole said before. That was the one user story that we weren't able to finish in the way that we originally intended. But it's not a problem, because as long as you load the map while it's connected to a Wi-Fi device, you can use it with the Stratus later on. Our switch to Google Maps was very rocky, to say the least. We picked MapKit, which is the native iOS map SDK at the beginning, but we had to switch to Google Maps because of the offline maps problem. Unfortunately, we ran into an additional problem when we manually installed the dependencies, because the dependency manager CocoaPods did not work for us to pull from the GitHub. So we had to all show each other how to do that, and that was a very stressful time. In hindsight, we would have looked more into if MapKit would have supported offline maps or not, so we didn't have to go through that. We also had a few difficulties regarding developing in iOS in general. We used the Swift 4 programming language, which is the most updated version of Swift. But the problem with Swift is it's such a modern programming language that it's constantly updating, like every year or every other year. So there's 4 different versions of Swift that are all being used at the same time. So when we were trying to find the solution to specific problems, we had to not only find what the solution was, but make sure that it was the right syntax as well, because all the Swift versions have completely different syntax. So next steps, these are just a list of things, suggestions that Apario may want to consider implementing as they take the project off of our hands. These are mostly stretch goals that we weren't able to implement because of time. The first is a satellite view and or a terrain view. Next is changing font colors for the increases and decreases of numerical values, and animated arrows next to the increasing and decreasing number values. They may also want to implement some sort of an image scaling for the plane, depending on the zoom level as well, because that may look a little bit cleaner. We weren't able to implement a responsive interface, so that beautiful UI that you saw only looks that good on a 9.7 iPad Pro. If you launched it on any other device right now, it wouldn't look like that. So responsiveness is definitely something that they may want to consider implementing later on. We made the backend modular, and we did that because it'll be a lot easier for Apario to implement their own backend functionality later on if they choose to do so. Questions?
Yeah. I guess Stratus, is that just a black box and you just get information that you're displaying on the screen? Or are you getting like XYZ vectors?
Okay, so how the Stratus works, you connect to it over Wi-Fi, and it sends you information over UDP, over 2 UDP sockets, and essentially what Apario has is their own classes of data. It's just pretty much blocks of data that they'll send you, and then they have a semantic on how you break it up, and you parse that into its individual pieces of information, and then we deal with it from there. If that answers your question.
Okay, I'm just wondering when it says ground speed, are you just getting a 32 for ground speed, or are you getting like an X of 39 miles per hour or Y of 2 miles per hour?
No, it's just a 32 bit piece of information for ground speed, and then it's a separate 32 whatever, I think 32 float piece of information for latitude, longitude, etc., etc. It's just a little tiny.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the UI, when you hit the compass mode, you're kind of following the path. Did you guys consider like factoring in noise for that at all? Because it seemed like when you were going straight, you would kind of tilt back and forth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys consider like putting 2% in there for something for just noise to
That's not a bad idea.
Well, if I may add on to that, driving in a car, testing the app is going to be a lot different from driving the plane, because just of the scale. So the path is always going to look a lot more straight. With a car, when you drive down the road, you kind of swerve back and forth a little bit. So it's going to look different when the pilot actually uses it.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, so did you have to end up building it out as an IPA? Like, did Apario provide you with a provisioning profile, all that kind of stuff, or did you not have to deal with any of that?
The only thing Apario provided us was a document that explained the classes that they'd be sending to us over data, over the Stratus. Other than that, it was kind of up to us to figure out how to parse the data and enter it into the application.
So, who is it driving around and exceeding the speed limit? Well, there's now video evidence of.
That is kilometers. So it's slower than it looked.
Yeah, I was going the speed limit. I keep things legal when it's being recorded.
I have a question related to that. So it was in kilometers per hour, but is there a mode to switch it to imperial or?
No, we did not implement that. Though we did implement functions so that it would be easy to go into the back end and implement functions to convert it to whatever you want. As far as kilometers per hour, you could easily convert it to like meters a second, blah, blah, blah. I suppose we did not implement functions to go from metric to imperial. So that's something that would have to be implemented. Or we throw in a settings tab or something.
I did see one time where you came to a corner and it must have had a stop sign and went 0 without crashing.
Yeah.
There's actually a strip of stop signs that we hit, and it was at like a really bad point because it was when we were gonna start drawing the path line. So I like quickly tried to get past all the stop signs as soon as possible, so it didn't look like we're just stopping the path. Anything else?
Thank you.
Good to go. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Brett Chastain.
Marin Sherling. Fyrat Kiser. 田一亮.
Anusha Prakash.
And our group worked with Architecture Technology Corporation, or ATC. So a little overview of the talking points we'll be talking about today. We have our project introduction, where we'll go over a little bit of the background of the company that we are working for, the system we're working with, and the project description. From there we'll move on to our solution, which we will talk about our goals to accomplish this project. From there we'll go on to the demo, which we will talk about the showcase our work that we've done so far. Then on to the current requirement statuses, which will show what we've accomplished and what still needs to be done. Move on to the risks and issues that we've encountered during this project, and then the post-mortem summary and next steps. So, Architecture Technology Corporation is a R&D and engineering company with a focus on networking, cybersecurity, and high performance computing, among other things. But our project mainly focuses on the cybersecurity and networking portions. Within these fields, they build innovative products, one of which is the Siren system. So what is Siren? Siren is a next-generation cyber range. It's essentially a cloud computing kind of setup where you have a bunch of virtual machines, such as workstations and servers, that allow you to simulate real-world scenarios for training and testing. So this could be something like breaking into a server to steal a file, or defending against someone breaking into your server to steal a file. This is just kind of knowledge that would kind of be difficult to come by practically in the real world, so it allows you a sort of sandbox, if you would, to try out all these different things. It includes a graphical exercise builder, which we've made use of to help with our project, as well as a system that monitors student progress via agents that sit and listen to the VMs that are uploaded to this system for changes in files, or files being deleted, or logins, among several other things. So our project, we were assigned to create a training module for the Siren system that teaches a user how to respond to an advanced persistent threat. So an advanced persistent threat is a threat that sits on the system for a period of time. Often it's months to even a year, that will sit in the background and gather data, be it passwords, usernames, or important files, and then send them off to someone who's not supposed to have it, essentially. And to accomplish this, we should also simulate a realistic enterprise environment so that the user can take this information and use it in a realistic setting as well. From there, I'll hand it off to Aaron, who will talk about our solution.
So, to accomplish this, we have created 5 objectives that the student user must accomplish before being able to cleanse the system of the APT. So first off, they have to locate the infected user, and then they have to log in to the infected user and identify the process, close it, delete the virus contents, and then delete the infected virus on our virus email. So if you move over to the Siren network, over here in the top section, we have the objectives. I'll get to the network layout below in a little bit. So up here, I apologize, you can't really see all of them. JavaScript doesn't size it properly, but that's not ours. That was given to us. So up top, we have, on the very left, we have an objective, and then an objective is then followed by a skill, which you need to satisfy, and then we have an agent, which listens. So this particular one sits on the system, or this specific virtual machine, and listens to a file, and it checks to see in the directory and the file which has been modified. You can set them to modified, deleted, or created on the specific agent. But if we move up, there are about 15 odd agents that we've been given to use. We've only accomplished about like 5 of them, or utilized 5 of them. And some of the objectives can get pretty crazy as well. You can get and or logics, and it can get pretty intensive. So to accomplish the realistic business enterprise, we had to image a few VMs. So first off, we imaged a domain controller and DNS server, which are Samba based. Then we moved on to the file server, which is well Samba based. We decided to incorporate an email server, which is Postfix and has a Snail client. And then, of course, we have to have a firewall. So that is pfSense. And that was probably the biggest issue, which we'll get into a little bit later. So here was our initial network diagram. Our initial network diagram included 2 firewalls, as well as a web server, mail server, DNS server, file server, and AD server. As you can see, these are all IPv4 addresses. We decided, or we had to switch over to IPv6 due to siren constraints. So this is our current working network diagram. We only have 1 firewall because we ran into issues configuring 2 of them. So we have the 1 firewall. We also got rid of the web server and the AD server, and we compiled the domain controller and the DNS server into one thing, so that's just on there as DNS server. We also, like I was saying, we changed all the IPv4s into IPv6s. So this is our current network. And then inside of Siren, below, here is what it looks like. So on the left, we have the malicious user connected to the firewall, which simulates the internet. And then we have a bridge then going to 2 more email, or an email server and an ADS server, and then the workstations on the right. So moving on, I'm going to pass it off, and we're going to talk about current requirement statuses.
So starting off, we had a lot of requirements for this project. So some of them that we really had to complete are obviously that we have to image all the VMs and populate them with noise, which is very essential for this system, because unless you have them, you can't really deploy anything and give anything for the user to look into. So we had the images of the VMs, we populated them with noise, and we upload them obviously to the Siren system, so that from the front end, any user or a student who's probably trying to learn will be able to access it. And then we have the file population scripts that we wrote to populate the VM, and we had the virus script obviously, which is very important. But some of the requirements that we still haven't completed are the test tasks in the Siren system that we have to write to see how it will probably run all the agents and how the network is running. And for that to happen, we need the agents, all of the agents, to be working exactly right. But we have some trouble configuring some of the agents still. And we have to create evidence for the user to find in the infected VM. But in a real world scenario, the APT would not really leave any log files behind or anything like that. So we haven't really fabricated any log files and large archive format files containing the stolen files, exactly. And we move on to the demo to show a little bit about workstations, the virus script, the email server, the Siren agents that Aaron was talking about, and the active domain controller and the firewall. So I'll be talking about showing you a little about the workstations that we have, which are mainly incorporated in the environment to make it look very realistic, like in any other enterprise. So it simulates workers in the environment. It is populated with noise, so that it is very difficult to find the virus file. So that's how we have populated the file with random documents, and we have directories inside directories. And I have basically populated the desktop, the documents, and the downloads, and the pictures. So in some of the documents, we have actually had some of the blueprints that we had downloaded, just so that we can make it look like a real workstation. And we have probably 3 directories. Yeah. Now we'll move on to the virus script. That is right.
Yeah, so for the virus script, it zips files from the infected workstation. It sends them via TCP over port 5001 to the malicious user outside of the business environment. We chose port 5001 just because it's a port that's not really used by anything. I looked it up and I believe it was used by some Yahoo networking or chat client, so probably not something you'd see on a general enterprise workstation. So it would come up as suspicious when you're looking in the firewall. And then the script also removes traces of the file aggregation, so it will zip things up and then remove them. And then we will switch over to my computer here. So the script, as it is, works via IPv4. So we had a little bit of an issue with the static IPs being IPv6, so that would be something we'd have to continue working on. If I can get this plugged in here. All right, and I blue screened, so that's an interesting one. Well, I guess I was going to show that you could run this file on the infected workstation, and it would take 2 files, zip them up, and then send them off, in this case every 5 seconds. On the Siren system, it would be ideally every 20 seconds. And the reason I chose 2 files in 20 seconds would be so essentially the script would not run out of files before it would stop, because once it gets to the very last file, it'll stop running, and that would be to ensure that the user has enough real-time sort of traffic to see files going in and out. And then the server will download them and save them with just a date, time format. And this, on the server, it really doesn't matter how it's saved, just that it's getting sent there, because every time the test restarts, that server will start clean. So moving on, we will go to the email server.
So the email server was very important because it was the point of the virus entry. We decided to go with a POP3 configuration instead of an IMAP3. We decided to do POP3 because all of the emails are aggregated in one place on the email server instead of being copied on the workstations, so that the student user would be able to easily look at one area instead of looking in multiple places. The email server contains quite a bit of noise to make parsing it difficult, so you can't just look in there and then you find the virus script immediately. There's around 90,000 emails in there. So moving over to the email server, we might have to enter a password. Oh, yeah. So here's the directory. We also decided to do a maildir instead of Mbox. So Mbox, it's an older version of a directory, email directory, because it sends all of the received emails into one file instead of creating individual files for them. So the mdir, it packages them up with a random name, I assume based on date time, and then puts them in their own file. And it also has a sent file, which is all the sent emails that you send out through the email. So you have current, new, and temp. Currently, there's only emails inside of new. So moving on. So here's one of the emails that we sent. As you can see, the date right here is randomized each and every time to simulate actual emails. Then you have subject lines, which are taken from actual email, business emails. And then further down, we have the subject line. And these are actual subject lines. We actually took them from the Enron email database, and these are actual Enron emails, so that's kind of interesting. That does it for the email server. Moving on, I will demonstrate a few of the Siren agents. So the Siren agents allow us to set criteria for test evaluation for the user. They listen to the VM for specific criteria and requirements to see if they've been accomplished. So the agents that we decided to use were directory changing agents, file alterations, command execution, and process start/stop. And moving back over. So on the email server, already have this in here. So this is the virus script email. So currently, if you go up top, here are all the VMs. You can shut them, start them, connect to them. And then over here, none of the objectives have been accomplished. And then we're going to delete the email server, or not delete the virus script. That'd be bad if we deleted the whole email server. And there it is. We've achieved the objective of deleting the infected email, and it's checked. So this was a file process monitor or file monitor agent, and then we can move over and check out another agent. The next agent I will be showcasing is a command logger. So this particular agent, you have to wrap the certain command around you have to wrap the certain command around siren script. I don't know why this isn't working. Well, I guess we're not logging in. So this particular, what it does is you have to wrap the command, and then once you process the command, it then sends it to a particular log file, and then the agent will listen on a 15-second interval as to whether you've actually ran the command, and it should take about like 10 seconds, and then you fulfill the objective, but I guess this VM is going rogue, and it doesn't want me to showcase it. So we're going to move on.
So the firewall is based on the FreeBSD operating system, and in real life, the firewall basically provides the main functions of port blocking and package filtering. But for this project, the firewall does one important job, that is tracking incoming and outgoing packets. And for the demo part, I chose to take a screenshot instead of live demo because normally the firewall on the Siren system, when it started up, it took so while to configuring itself. And also, since our project doesn't really use the internet, because the malicious user is actually simulate the internet, so we won't have this much internet traffic to show here. So I decided to take a screenshot to show the network traffic on my own personal computer. And you can see the source and destination of that packet. And you can also see the size of the packets. And this would be very useful to tracking the if the malicious users send the virus to the users. And next, Phil will cover the domain controllers.
So the role of the domain controller in the system was, a network directory service, as the name suggests, store information about the computer network and offers features and retrieving and managing that information. So essentially, it's a database composed of records or objects describing users and available network resources, such as like servers, printers, and all application in the system. And then if you see, it authenticates and can you get?
Oh, sorry.
And authenticates and authorize all users and computers in the system. Plus, it's assign and enforcing security policies for all computers and installing our updating software. So as you see here, it is like in my computer, and when I'm running, it's working locally in my computer, but there was some issues with the static IP addresses in the Siren system, so that's why we cannot show you in the Siren system, unfortunately. And from now,
and the risk and issues for the project. So for now, we are not being able to create realistic virus and network layout. because the realistic virus will be extremely complicated to create. And also, as previous statement, we don't have a realistic network layout because we have some trouble to create a dual firewall with a DMZ zone. And also we figure out for the exercise, we don't really need a DMZ zone. So we didn't create a realistic network layout. And also, since we're lack of knowledge of networking of network configurations, we have some troubles with configuring the IPv4 and IPv6 static address. There's some conflicts when we uploading our virtual machines to the Siren system because the Siren system is overwriting our IPv4 address with IPv6 address. Also, the domain controller we used has issues with the static IP, as Faraz stated before, and this caused a significant delays as we wanted to test all of the virtual machines. And finally, we still have trouble with configuring the agents for some of our virtual machines. And next, Faraz could cover the summary.
So post-mortem summary. So far through the project, it's been 3 months, and we learned a lot about the APTs, and we learned about how to set up VMs. Actually, we set up so many VMs, and we learned how to set up the network for several VMs too. And then we actually got to use a totally new system, Siren system, and then try to first of all configure everything about the system, and then upload all these things. So we are still working on so many part of the project, and with all ups and downs that come with it. And then the next step for us is we are going to finish configuring the agents. We did already figure like 4 of them, but we have to still work on the rest of the agents and then try to figure out, and then get the DNS and domain controller working on the Siren. It works in the computer, my personal computer, but then when we try to upload the system, it just gives some configuration problems. We have to work on that. And then add the users, the domain on Siren, and testing the system on the front end. So then simulate network traffic on the internal network. So that will make the suspicious traffic harder to find. And finally, I would like to thank everybody to come here and watch the presentation. If you guys have any question, go ahead and ask. Thank you again.
So there were a number of issues that you guys are running into, and I know this is a new thing for them too. They're just developing. Are you writing up like some kind of a report at the end that says, here's suggestions for how to make it easier for people writing exercises?
Yes, I actually wrote 3 READMEs on how to configure agents and static IPs. I got some of the static IPs to work, but not all of them. So I'm getting there. I also have a list of changes in my mind, but they know that, and I tell them all every time that they come up and all the bugs. But that'd be a good idea to compile them all into one place.
Yeah, a lot of things we'd upload something and then it wouldn't work, and we'd contact our sponsor and be like, yeah, we know what's going on there. Let me just change something in the back end, and then it would go through. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's still pretty buggy on the back end.
Any other questions? No?
How would you rate the China and the Russian and American hacking ability?
Hacking ability? I would have to say that once we create this simulation, we will be one leg up on the Russians and the Chinese.
We have
So, yeah.
Chinese.
Yeah, we got the Chinese here. All right, thank you so much. Hope you guys have a good day.